The observation deck of the Galactic Military Academy hummed with the nervous energy of 200 cadets from 17 different species. I pressed my thermal sensing appendages against the transparent aluminum viewport, watching the distant stars blur into streaks as our training vessel prepared for another hyperspace jump. My name is Korvin, and I am a Thessian, which means I possess 4 eyes, bioluminescent skin that shifts colors with my mood, and absolutely zero understanding of what I was about to witness. "Attention, all cadets!" The voice of Commander Velk crackled through the intercom, his Krilthan accent making every consonant sound like gravel being crushed. "Proceed to Combat Simulation Chamber 7 for your Predator-Prey Dynamics examination. You have 15 minutes. A collective groan rippled through the crowd. This was the class everyone dreaded. Not because it was difficult, but because it forced us to confront the fundamental truth that separated species across the galaxy. Some of us were prey, some of us were predators, and some of us, like the Krilthan, were scavengers who preferred not to think about either category too deeply. I shuffled alongside my podmate, Trellis, a 6-limbed Vexorian whose exoskeleton clinked softly with each step. "I do not understand why we must study predation," she chittered, her mandibles clicking nervously. "We are all civilized beings now. We use diplomacy, not teeth." "Tell that to the Kravaxians," I muttered, my skin flickering orange with anxiety as I remembered the war videos from our history module. The Kravaxians were one of the few predator species in the Galactic Coalition, and their battle tactics were efficient, brutal, effective in ways that made my 3 stomachs churn. We filed into the simulation chamber, a massive spherical room with holographic projectors lining every surface. Already seated in the center ring were cadets from a dozen different worlds. The gelatinous pluvians, insectoid charax, the amphibious Brecken, and others. But my attention immediately fixed on the human. There was only one human in our entire class. Her name was Dakota Mills, and she sat with the kind of relaxed posture that I had learned meant she was either completely at ease or coiled tighter than a plasma spring. With humans, you could never quite tell. She had tied her dark hair back in what she called a ponytail, and her face held that peculiar human expression that could mean absolutely anything. Lips slightly curved upward at the corners. Commander Velk entered, his scaled bulk casting shadows across the chamber floor. He was old, even by Krilthan standards, with scars that told stories of conflicts most of us had only read about. "Today, we discuss predation," he began, his voice carrying weight that made several smaller cadets shrink back. "Not the sanitized version from your textbooks, the reality, the psychology, the fundamental drive that shapes how predator species think, hunt, and survive." He activated the holo projector. A massive Kravaxian materialized above us, fangs bared, eyes gleaming with hunger. Several cadets gasped. I watched my skin pulse between purple and yellow, panic colors I could not quite control. "This is a Kravaxian shock trooper," Velk continued. "Note the forward-facing eyes, the prominent canines, the muscular structure built for pursuit and takedown. These are the markers of a predator species." He gestured with one clawed hand. "Now, who can tell me what makes a predator truly dangerous?" Silence stretched across the chamber like frozen space. No one wanted to answer. No one wanted to think about it. "The teeth?" offered a Pluvian cadet, his gelatinous form quivering. "Incorrect." Velk's eyes narrowed. "Teeth are tools. Any species can evolve sharp implements. What makes a predator dangerous exists here." He tapped his skull. "And here." He placed a claw over where his heart would be, if Krilthan had hearts in the same traditional sense. "The mind and the will," Dakota said quietly from her seat. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Every head, eye stalk, and sensory organ turned toward her. Velk's expression shifted into what might have been approval. "Elaborate, Cadet Mills." Dakota leaned forward slightly, her strange, flexible spine allowing movements that made me uncomfortable. A predator thinks differently, processes information differently. They do not just react to threats, they anticipate, they plan. They understand that everything around them can be either food, competition, or threat. Every interaction is assessed through that lens, even if they are not actively hunting. The chamber had gone completely silent now. Even the environmental systems seemed to hold their recycled breath. And humans? Velk asked, his voice dropping an octave. Where do humans fall on this spectrum, Cadet Mills? Oh, stars and void, I thought. This was the question everyone wondered about, but no one dared ask. Humans had joined the Galactic Coalition only 70 years ago, and their classification remained complicated. They ate plants and animals. They had forward-facing eyes and impressive stamina, but they also formed social bonds that rivaled the most communal prey species. They were a contradiction that made xenobiologists argue for decades. Dakota's smile widened just slightly, showing teeth that were, I suddenly noticed, far more prominent than I had previously considered. Not as dramatic as Kravaxian fangs, but they're nonetheless designed for tearing as much as grinding. Why do you not answer the commander's question? Trellis whispered beside me, her translator making her concern sound like wind through metal pipes. But Dakota did not answer. She just maintained that smile. That expression that I was rapidly realizing meant something very different than I had assumed. It was not friendliness. It was not nervousness. It was something else entirely. Cadet Mills, I asked you a putrid question, Velk pressed, but there was something in his voice now. Respect? Caution? I could not identify it. I think, Commander, Dakota said slowly, that answering that question directly would be counterproductive to maintaining the current atmosphere of collaborative learning. Several cadets laughed nervously. I did not, because I was watching her eyes, and I was remembering something from our xenobiology course about human evolution, about how they were persistence hunters, about how they used to chase prey animals for hours, days even, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion, about how human ancestors had climbed to the top of Earth's food chain, not through strength or speed, but through being too stubborn and too smart to quit. Very diplomatic, Velk said dryly, but this is a military academy, not a diplomatic summit. We need warriors who understand both themselves and their enemies. So I will ask again, and this time, I expect a direct answer. What kind of predator are humans? Dakota's smile vanished. What replaced it made my skin flash white, the Thessian equivalent of pure instinctive fear. Her expression became neutral, flat, and somehow that was infinitely worse than any display of aggression. The persistent kind, she said simply. Velk nodded slowly. Demonstration time then. Cadet Mills, please come to the center of the chamber. Dakota stood with fluid grace and walked to the designated circle. The holographic projectors whirred to life around her. This simulation will generate a prey animal from the Coalition database, Velk announced. Something that exists in nature. Something that has evolved successful evasion strategies over millions of years. Cadet Mills will demonstrate human hunting methodology. No weapons, no tools, just natural human capability. This is going to be educational in the worst possible way, I muttered to Trellis, who had gone completely rigid beside me. The hologram materialized. It was a springbok from Earth's African continent, before humans had spread across their planet like a species-wide plague of intelligence and curiosity. The holographic animal looked around nervously, its large eyes scanning for threats. It was beautiful, graceful, built for explosive speed. Begin, Velk commanded. Dakota did not sprint. She did not lunge. She simply started walking toward the springbok at a steady, measured pace. The springbok saw her immediately and bolted. It was fast. So fast that it became a blur of brown and white, clearing the chamber's perimeter in seconds. Dakota kept walking, not running. Walking. She has already lost. A Cherek's cadet clicked. The prey has escaped. Watch, was all Velk said. Dakota walked to where the springbok had gone, her head moving slightly as she tracked something the rest of us could not see. The hologram had created a full savanna environment now, complete with tall grass and scattered trees. The springbok had vanished into the landscape, but Dakota did not stop. She maintained that same, steady, terrifying pace. When the springbok appeared again, several hundred meters away, Dakota adjusted her direction without breaking stride. The animal ran again. Dakota followed. "This is inefficient," Trellis observed. "She expends energy without closing distance." "Keep watching," I said, because I was beginning to understand, beginning to feel that deep, instinctive horror that every prey species carries in their genetic memory. 30 minutes passed. An hour. The springbok ran repeatedly, always faster than Dakota, always escaping, but it was breathing harder now, stopping more frequently, looking back with increasing frequency and decreasing hope. Dakota never stopped, never hesitated, never showed fatigue. She just kept coming, inevitable as entropy, patient as stone. "By the Maker," Trellis breathed. "She is not trying to catch it. She is waiting for it to stop running." "Persistence predation," I whispered, my skin cycling through. Colors I did not have names for. Humans evolved to hunt by simply refusing to stop. They do not need to be faster. They just need to be more stubborn than their prey's stamina. The springbok collapsed after 2 hours, not from injury, from exhaustion. Its sides heaved as it lay in the holographic grass, too tired to even stand. Dakota walked up to it calmly, knelt beside it, and placed her hand on its neck in what the simulation registered as a kill. The hologram dissolved. Dakota stood and walked back to her seat, without a word, without any expression of triumph or satisfaction. She sat down, took a drink from her water container, and waited for the next part of class, as if she had not just demonstrated the single most terrifying thing I had witnessed in my entire life. "That," Commander Velk said, into the absolute silence, "is a predator. Not the loudest, not the fastest, not the strongest, but potentially the most dangerous, because human predation is psychological warfare. They do not just hunt your body, they hunt your hope." I looked at Dakota, who had returned to that small, polite smile. She caught me staring and winked. Actually winked, as if this were all some kind of joke. "Tomorrow," Velk announced, "we will discuss pack hunting tactics." Class dismissed. As we filed out, I heard 2 Kravaxian cadets talking in their clicking language. I had studied enough to understand the gist. Remind me never to make an enemy of the humans. At least when we hunt, we make it quick. "Agreed," the other responded. "They have turned patience into a weapon. That is not honor, that is horror." I could not disagree, and as I passed Dakota in the corridor, she smiled at me again, that same pleasant expression I had mistaken for friendliness. "See you tomorrow, Korvin," she said cheerfully. "Yes," I managed. "Tomorrow." But as I walked away, I could not shake the feeling that I had just learned something fundamental about the galaxy. We had invited humans into the 10 Coalition believing they were like us, civilized, evolved beyond their predatory nature. But watching Dakota in that simulation, I understood the truth. Humans had not evolved beyond being predators. They had simply become predators who could pass as something else. They had weaponized their appearance of harmlessness, and that made them more dangerous than any Kravaxian shock trooper, with obvious fangs and claws, because, when a Kravaxian looked at you, you knew you were prey. When a human looked at you and smiled, you had no idea what you were, until it was far, far too late. I returned to my quarters and spent the rest of the evening researching human history. What I found did not comfort me. A species that had climbed from prey to apex predator on a death world. A species that had domesticated wolves, turned them into pets, and then done the same with cats who had never really stopped trying to kill them. A species that looked at the most dangerous animals on their planet and thought, I wonder what that tastes like. They had gone to space not because they had to, but because they were curious. They had joined the coalition not because they needed protection, but because they wanted friends, and somehow that was the most terrifying thing of all, because it meant that everything else, all that potential for violence and persistence and absolute refusal to give up, was just waiting underneath, politely leashed, carefully controlled, but absolutely, definitely, still there. I did not sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Dakota's smile and heard her footsteps, steady and patient and utterly inevitable, walking through my nightmares like she had walked through that simulation. Tomorrow's class could not possibly be worse. I was so wrong. The next morning arrived with all the enthusiasm of a solar flare heading toward an unshielded colony. I dragged myself to the mess hall, my skin still flickering, anxious yellows and oranges from the previous quick dip. Night's research spiral. Trellis met me at our usual table, her exoskeleton looking duller than normal. Did you sleep? She asked, prodding at her nutrient paste with one manipulator. Define sleep, I responded, watching the entrance nervously. Did you know that humans used to hunt animals called mammoths? Creatures 10 times their size, covered in thick fur and armor-like hide, with tusks that could impale 3 humans at once? I did not need to know that, Trellis said flatly. They threw pointed sticks at them. Just sticks, and they won. I stabbed at my own breakfast with perhaps too much force. They hunted everything on their planet. Everything. And when they ran out of worthy opponents, they started hunting each other for sport, and called it war. You sound obsessed, Korvin. I sound informed, I corrected. There is a difference. Do you know what humans call the period before they developed agriculture? The Stone Age? They lived that way for 2 million years. 2 million years of hunting, tracking, and developing bigger brains specifically to hunt better. Dakota entered the mess hall at that moment, chatting pleasantly with a Brecken cadet about something called fishing. She looked completely normal, utterly non-threatening in her standard-issue cadet uniform. She even had what humans called bedhead, her hair sticking up at odd angles. She does not look like a nightmare creature, Trellis observed. That is exactly the point, I said, my skin flashing dark purple. Camouflage is not just about blending into the environment. Sometimes it is about blending into civilization. Combat Simulation Chamber 7 was already crowded when we arrived. Word had spread about yesterday's demonstration, and apparently half the academy wanted to see what would happen next. Even some of the instructors had shown up, trying to look casual while clearly positioning themselves for optimal viewing angles. Commander Velk entered precisely on time, accompanied by another instructor I recognized as Captain Brinks, a Vexorian tactical specialist. Yesterday, we observed solitary hunting. Velk began without preamble. Today, we examine something far more complex. Pack tactics, coordinated predation. The kind of hunting that requires communication, trust, and synchronized strategic thinking. He gestured toward Dakota and 3 other cadets. I had not paid much attention to before. My oversight. All humans. There were actually 4 humans in our class, not 1. How had I missed this? Meet Cadet Mills's pack, Velk announced. Cadet James Torres, Cadet Aisha Okonkwo, and Cadet Dmitry Volkov. They have volunteered to demonstrate human pack hunting methodology. Torres was built like what humans called a linebacker, all compact muscle and controlled power. Okonkwo moved with a dancer's precision, every gesture economical and purposeful. Volkov had the unsettling trait of rarely blinking, his pale eyes tracking everything with mechanical precision. Oh, void take us all. I whispered. The simulation will generate 4 Kravaxian shock troopers, Velk continued, and the entire chamber erupted in shocked, chittering, clicking, and gasping. These are not prey animals. These are trained military combatants. Holographic, yes, but programmed with actual Kravaxian combat algorithms from real veterans. This is madness, a Pluvian cadet gurgled. Kravaxians are apex predators. 4 of them against 4 unarmed humans? This is not education. This is execution. Dakota and her packmates entered the simulation circle, rolling their shoulders and stretching in ways that made their joints pop audibly. They spoke quietly among themselves in rapid English, too fast for my translator to fully process. I caught fragments. Flanking pattern Omega. Aisha takes point. Remember Budapest. What happened in Budapest? Trellis whispered. I have no idea, and I am terrified to find out. I admitted. The holographic Kravaxians materialized. 2.5 meters tall, scaled muscle wrapped around intelligent malice, carrying plasma rifles and wearing combat armor. Their eyes locked onto the humans immediately, and even knowing these were holograms, I felt my flight response screaming at me to run. Begin, Velk commanded. What happened next lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. I know because I checked the timestamp afterward, unable to believe how fast everything had occurred. The Kravaxians opened fire immediately, plasma bolts searing through the air. But the humans had already moved, not away, which would have been the sane response. Toward the Kravaxians, splitting into pairs, using angles and cover that had not existed until they created them through pure momentum and positioning. Dakota and Torres went left. Okonkwo and Volkov went right. The Kravaxians, programmed with millions of years of predatory instinct, did exactly what any sensible predator would do. They split up to chase both groups. They divided the enemy, Captain Brinks observed, her mandibles clicking excitedly. Classic prey behavior, but weaponized. Torres suddenly stopped running and reversed direction, charging directly at the Kravaxian pursuing him. The holographic alien raised its rifle, but Torres had already dropped into a slide, passing under the weapon's arc. Dakota appeared from behind simulated cover, leaping onto the Kravaxian's back with a move that would have impressed any Charax climber. The Kravaxian thrashed, trying to dislodge her. Torres swept its legs. The creature went down hard. Dakota wrapped her arms around its throat in what my cultural database informed me was called a rear naked choke. The hologram went limp. First elimination at 1 minute 12 seconds, Velk announced. Continue observation. On the other side of the simulation, Okonkwo was doing something incredible. She was running, but not in a straight line. She wove between cover points, each movement making the pursuing Kravaxians adjust their aim, wasting precious seconds. And behind them, silent as vacuum itself, Volkov had circled back. She is bait, I realized aloud. She is deliberately making herself a target. Volkov struck from behind, using a combination of leverage and momentum that turned the Kravaxian's own body weight against it. There was a crack as the hologram's arm bent wrong. The creature roared, spinning to face this new threat. Okonkwo reversed course, attacking from behind now. They had switched roles seamlessly, without verbal communication that any of us could detect. How are they coordinating? Trellis demanded. I see no hand signals. I hear no commands. Watch their eyes, Captain Brinks said softly. Watch how they track each other. They are reading intention from body language, from positioning. They have trained together so extensively that they function as a single organism with 4 bodies. The remaining 2 Kravaxians had regrouped, learning from their fallen packmates. They positioned back to back, weapons ready, scanning for threats, smart, tactically sound. Against most opponents, it would have been effective. Against humans, it lasted another 2 minutes. Dakota and Torres approached from opposite angles, not hiding, just walking steadily closer. The Kravaxians tracked them, weapons trained, waiting for the optimal shot. What they did not see was Okonkwo climbing. Somehow, she had scaled the simulated rock formation behind them, moving with gecko-like precision. She dropped from above, landing on one Kravaxian's shoulders, her weight driving it forward into its partner. Both went down in a tangle of limbs and weapons. Volkov and Torres were there instantly, securing the holograms with holds that looked simple but left the Kravaxians completely immobilized. Dakota stood over them all, breathing slightly harder than normal, but nowhere near exhaustion. She looked at Commander Velk and shrugged. "We train pretty hard on Earth." The simulation dissolved. Silence crashed over the chamber like a collapsing star. 4 Kravaxian shock troopers, Velk said slowly, neutralized in 4 minutes by 4 unarmed humans using nothing but coordination, pattern recognition, and what humans call improvisation, the ability to adapt tactics in real time based on enemy response. "This changes everything," a Krilthan cadet whispered somewhere behind me. "How did we not realize?" "Because they are friendly," I said, my skin now a pale, shocked white. "Because they smile and tell jokes and make friends easily. Because they look at the galaxy and see potential allies instead of potential prey. We mistook restraint for weakness." "Correct, Cadet Korvin," Velk said, having heard me with his enhanced auditory organs. "Humans possess what might be the most dangerous combination in the known galaxy. Apex predator instincts combined with advanced social cooperation and genuine empathy. They can hunt you down with terrifying efficiency, or they can be your most loyal allies. The choice is entirely dependent on how you treat them." Dakota and her pack walked back to their seats, fist bumping each other with satisfied grins. Torres offered Okonkwo his water bottle. Volkov was already reviewing something on his datapad, probably analyzing their performance for optimization. "There is one more demonstration," Captain Brinks announced, surprising everyone. "We have discussed human hunting tactics. Now, we address something perhaps more important. What happens when humans themselves become prey?" The simulation reactivated. This time, only Dakota entered the circle. And then, the predators appeared. Not Kravaxians, not anything from the Coalition databases. These were creatures from human mythology, from their horror stories, things called raptors. Pack hunters from Earth's ancient past, before humans even existed. Intelligent, fast, and absolutely lethal. 6 velociraptors against 1 human, Brinks explained. Based on paleontological data and behavioral modeling, these creatures once terrified human ancestors. Let us observe how modern humans respond to genuine fear. The raptors circled, testing, probing, looking for weakness. Dakota did not run. She backed toward a thick tree, protecting her rear. She picked up a fallen branch, testing its weight. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. The first raptor struck from the left. Dakota swung the branch, connecting with its jaw, redirecting rather than stopping the attack. She moved right, maintaining the tree at her back. 2 more raptors feinted from different angles. "She is thinking 3 moves ahead," Torres called out from the stands. "Go, Dakota! Show them Protocol 7. Whatever Protocol 7 was, it involved Dakota suddenly screaming. Not a scream of fear, a scream of rage, of challenge, of something so primal that several cadets actually flinched. She charged the nearest raptor, branch raised like a club, and the hologram actually hesitated. That hesitation cost it. Dakota struck 3 times in rapid succession, then grabbed another branch, breaking it to create a sharp point. She jabbed at another raptor, forcing it back, using aggression where caution had failed. "She is not trying to kill them," I observed, fascinated despite my terror. "She is trying to make herself too expensive to hunt." "Precisely," Brinks confirmed. "Humans learned early that sometimes you cannot win a fight, But you can make that fight so costly that your opponent decides you are not worth the effort. They call it making yourself an unprofitable target. The raptors regrouped, and I could almost see the calculation in their programmed behavior. This prey fights back hard. This prey might injure or kill one of us. Is the meal worth the risk? They left. Simply melted back into the jungle simulation, choosing easier prey elsewhere. Dakota stood there, breathing hard, improvised weapons still clutched in her hands. When the simulation ended, she dropped the branches and laughed. Actually, laughed. Well, that was exciting. Can we go again? Absolutely not, Velk said firmly. But there was something in his expression. Respect, certainly, but also relief that humans were on our side. Class ended early. No one felt like continuing after that. We filed out in small groups, everyone talking in hushed tones about what they had witnessed. I found myself walking alongside Dakota by pure chance. You knew what we were thinking, I said suddenly. Yesterday, when Commander Velk asked what kind of predator humans were, you knew we would all be terrified. Dakota looked at me with those forward-facing, binocular vision eyes that could track prey across ridiculous distances. Yeah, she admitted. I knew. That is why I did not want to answer. Because the truth is complicated. Yes, we are predators. Yes, we evolved to hunt. But we also evolved to cooperate, to protect, to choose who we are instead of just accepting what nature made us. That does not make it less frightening, I said honestly. No, she agreed. But here is the thing, Korvin. Every species in the coalition has something that makes them special. Thessians have those incredible color-changing abilities for communication. Vexorians have 6 limbs and can multitask like nobody's business. Kravaxians have raw strength and resilience. Humans have stubborn persistence and pack loyalty. We are not monsters. We are just really, really good at not giving up, especially when we are protecting someone we care about. She smiled then. Genuinely this time. Not the smile from yesterday that had haunted my nightmares. A real smile, warm and honest. The coalition does not need to fear humans. The coalition needs to understand that when humans decide you are pack, they will walk through fire, hunt down impossible odds, and refuse to stop until everyone gets home safe. That is what makes us dangerous, but it is also what makes us valuable. I thought about that as we walked through the corridors, about how humans had taken their predatory nature and transformed it into protection, about how they could smile and mean it, while still being capable of everything we had witnessed. I think, I said slowly, my skin shifting to a thoughtful blue, that I am very glad humans chose to join the coalition instead of conquering it. Dakota laughed, a sound like atmospheric bells. To be fair, conquering is so much more work than just asking nicely to be friends. We tried the whole empire thing on Earth. Romans, Mongols, British, dozens of others. Turned out, cooperation worked better in the long run. Less paperwork. More potluck dinners. Potluck dinners? I asked, confused. Where everyone brings food to share. It is this human thing where we all contribute, and everyone eats well. Much better than the alternative. She paused at an intersection. Hey, some of us are getting together tonight to watch Earth movies, old action films from the 20th century. Want to come? We will have popcorn. My every instinct screamed that spending voluntary time with human predators was a terrible idea. But something stronger overrode that instinct. Curiosity. The very human trait that they had somehow infected me with. What kind of movies? I asked cautiously. Die Hard, Predator, Aliens, stuff like that. Classic humans versus overwhelming odds scenarios. It will be educational. She grinned. Plus, you will learn that humans mostly survived not because we were the strongest, but because we got really good at improvising and making friends with unlikely allies. I will come, I decided, but I am bringing trellis. The more the merrier? Dakota said cheerfully. Oh, and Korvin? Thanks for not running away screaming after yesterday. A lot of cadets have been avoiding us. It is nice to know we have not completely terrified everyone. As she walked away, I realized something profound. Yes, humans were predators. Yes, they were terrifying when they chose to be. But they had spent thousands of years learning to be more than their instincts, to build civilizations on cooperation rather than domination. The galaxy had not invited monsters into the coalition. We had invited humans, and perhaps the scariest thing about them was not their ability to hunt, but their ability to choose not to smile genuinely, to offer friendship, to share their popcorn. That night, squashed onto a human-sized couch, between Trellis and a very enthusiastic Torres, who kept explaining the action scenes, I watched John McClane face impossible odds, with nothing but wit and stubborn refusal to die. And I understood. Humans were not monsters. They were just people who had learned to weaponize everything, including kindness. And when you were their friend, that meant all that terrifying capability was pointed outward, protecting you. As the credits rolled, and Dakota threw popcorn at Torres for spoiling the next movie, I felt my skin shift to a contented green. That made it a little less frightening, and a lot more interesting.